We're just 3 weeks away from the big bad evil villain that we've been waiting to interact with for over 6 years, Captain Flameheart, to make his re-debut in Sea of Thieves. Yes, we all loved his floating flamehead, but starting on July 25th, we'll be able to meet him in person. At least, that's what all the memes I saw on Twitter were telling me. Good lord, that was a day. Anyway, with this event, the launch of Season 13, in my mind being the beginning of the next chapter in the Sea of Thieves story, I thought I'd take some time to review all the previous seasons of Sea of Thieves and rank them on a tier list, based on impact of the game at large, as well as smaller, more quality of life improvements that nowadays we just simply can't live without. Now, disclaimer, this is my own personal opinion as a Sea of Thieves player. I don't expect our opinions to align exactly, and we may disagree entirely. Post your tier list in the comments if you feel like as well to compare. Let's start, of course, with Season 1. First off, can you believe the debut of Seasons was back in January 2021? Of course, Sea of Thieves is not the first game ever to utilize a battle pass, or what's known as a rewards track system in their game. Gamers often point to Fortnite as the game that launched it all, and though it did bring it to the mainstream, it was actually Valve, yes, Lord Gaben himself, who brought the first couple of battle passes for Dota 2 and Team Fortress 2. Could you imagine a world where instead of battle passes in Sea of Thieves, we ended up with something like a loot box system instead? Ugh. So, Season 1 is released, and for the first time ever, we get a plunder pass where players progress through by earning renown by performing in-game actions. Now, before I talk more about the season itself, let me just say that I love the renown system, because I have played other games before, and trust me when I say, things could be way worse. Take, for example, Fallout 76, which has something called the score system. Now, in their system, you earn points to progress their battle pass, but only a certain number of points per day, and only by performing specific actions that the game wants you to do. What happens if you miss a day? You miss out on those days' points, and your window of completing the battle pass shrinks. Compare that to Sea of Thieves, where if I knew I was going to be away from the game for a few weeks, I could grind out the entirety of the season pass in a day or two, because nearly every action, from putting loot on your ship, to killing skeletons, to completing world events, or even just fishing, all gives you renown toward your pass. Now, I have other gripes with the seasons, which we'll get into later in the video, but this is not one of them. Kudos to you, Rare. Now, in Season 1, we did have several events in-game, including Champions of Souls, a Festival of Fishing, and Vault Raiders. Each of these time-limited events offered an opportunity to earn cosmetics and titles for your pirate. You'll notice that these live campaigns sort of drop off as time goes on, and there are players on both sides of the spectrum on this. Some are against them because of the fear of it driving FOMO, or the fear of missing out, where if they can't play during a particular time period, they'll miss out on the rewards. Others are for it, as it provides them a special title and reward that they know later on they can point to as being unique compared to the player base at large. Let me know in the comments where you stand on this. The big content update for this season, though, was not necessarily the most impactful. The Merchant Alliance Trading Company got a new voyage for the first time since game launch, Lost Shipments, where players would track down a shipwreck from clues found in water and on washed up beaches, unlock the captain's cabin for merchant loot, and pick up the merchant manifest to complete the voyage. Now, don't get me wrong, getting a new voyage from merchants was awesome after having spent years dealing with either trade goods or animals, but as a benchmark for what to expect for season content drops in the future, it didn't make the greatest first impression. I'm gonna give Season 1 a C. Great implementation of the renown system, but the lack of a truly impactful content drop really hampers the grade here. Moving on to Season 2, which, if I had my say, would have been Seasons 1 and 2 combined. The highlight of this season was a new world event, the Fort of Fortune, which served as another avenue to the most sought-after piece of loot in the game, the Chest of Legends. After years of watching people talk about Fort of the Damned, we had this new event where it would spawn randomly and evoke a sense of the original Skull Forts back in Year 1, where everyone wanted to get to them. There was only one limited time event during this season, Reapers vs. the World, which actually lasted the entirety of this season, which I did appreciate. There were 20 total challenges that players could complete for rewards, and I thought that the way that Rare had spread out the challenges so that each month was a different faction focus, from Gold Hoarder to Order of Souls to Merchants, and then with the Reapers involved with all of them, really made for a great time. I hope that Rare brings this style of event back in the future. Season 2 did also introduce another feature to the Merchant Alliance Trading Company in commodities. This new loot item has players purchasing goods from one merchant company representative at an outpost and delivering them to another company representative at a different outpost. There were even trade routes added to the system so that certain commodities were either in high or low demand, so that players would be incentivized to go to the correct outpost for maximum profit. Truthfully, I love this system and I wish Rare would do more with it. It's one of the few game loops in Sea of Thieves that has zero combat, fishing being the other major one that comes to mind. And anything that gives players choices in how they want to make their fortunes is a-okay by me. Sadly, commodities haven't really been looked at since their release, save for the loot values being nerfed within the first few weeks of launch. One last note on Season 2, this also brought a huge quality of life improvement to starting a voyage on the seas, which was resource crates. Before, you had to go out and find a storage crate in the wild and then bring it back to an outpost to fill it. With Season 2's launch, you could buy a storage crate or other resource crates like cannonballs, wood, or fruit directly from the merchant representative and stock up on supplies before even starting your first voyage. Anything that helps speed up the time to sail is a win in my book. Season 2, that's a B. New world event types that have led to the Fort of Fortune being a staple of conflict on the seas, especially when considering what a certain later season did to improve it even further. New loot, new non-combat related treasure grind, and new quality of life improvements. It was a winner, which leads us to Season 3, which when you look at it, you have to look at it from the lens of a pirate's life and outside a pirate's life. And let's be honest, the launch of a pirate's life was the apex of Sea of Thieves. It had never had as many eyeballs on it since its launch until that point in time, and it hasn't had it since, save for the recent PS5 launch, and for good reason. It's the Pirates of the Caribbean IP, the series that brought pirates into the mainstream in the 2000s. Before this, I had only seen 2 pirate movies in my life. One was Hook, a family-focused take on Disney's Peter Pan that starred Robin Williams as Peter Pan and Dustin Hoffman as Captain Hook, and if you haven't watched it, both could chew through the scenery, and to this day, I'll still reference Bangarang or Roo-Fee-Oh! The other was Muppet Treasure Island, and if you haven't seen Tim Curry ham it up with a bunch of Muppets, you are missing out. So yes, A Pirate's Life was huge for Sea of Thieves. However, it wasn't without its issues. The first month after release, it had 3 hotfix patches put out at the rate of 1 a week, all focused around bugs that were in A Pirate's Life Tall Tales that players had encountered that were severely impacting their experience. Yes, they were eventually fixed, but in my opinion, it dampened what was a huge moment for the game, and is just one example of several where the game could have reached even greater heights, but was brought down because of technical difficulties instead. In the grand scheme of things, however, it was still a massive win for Rare and Microsoft to be able to bring Disney IP into their game, and I'm sure this later served as the example for future collaborations, such as with the Legend of Monkey Island IP that we'll talk about later in the video. Outside of A Pirate's Life Tall Tales themselves, Season 3 did bring a few changes to the main adventure as well. Phantoms, ocean crawlers, and sirens all made their debut in Season 3, which meant for the first time, pirates had new enemies to deal with outside of skeletons on land or sharks on sea. 4 limited time events, Flags of Friendship, the Plunder Games, Making Mayhem, and Jewels of the Deep were released to keep players invested over the course of the season's duration. Honestly, for me, I was thrilled with A Pirate's Life, but I just don't think it stuck the landing that it could have. This is probably going to be controversial, but I'm going to give Season 3 an A. A Pirate's Life story is phenomenal, but it's isolated away from the rest of the game, and there really isn't a reason to go back to do them again after you've completed all the commendations. I hope that one day we'll be able to see more integration here. Imagine multiple crews running around Dead Man's Grotto, or a full server all doing Lords of the Sea at the same time. Meanwhile, the main adventure mode didn't really gain anything other than the new enemy types, unless you count the variety of Pirate's Life Emporium items that were put into the game. Next up, we've got Season 4, which hailed the arrival of the Sunken Kingdom in the form of shrines and treasuries that players could explore under the waves. From an exploration perspective, these were huge additions to the game, similar to the Devil's Roar. In my opinion, the one thing that held them back from the same level of esteem, though, was simply that if you were a solo player, you ran a huge risk in trying to navigate these shrines and treasuries because you were leaving your sloop back on the surface alone, with nothing to guard it against enemy attack. This sort of restriction did limit the enthusiasm to which I approached the content personally, because I do mostly play Sea of Thieves solo. There were 2 limited time events during the season, Fury of the Damned, which did unlock pieces of the Wicked Web set, which I did enjoy, and Feast of Bounty, which gave us a few different accessories like makeup scars, and so on. And I did enjoy the best reward from this season, the Sunken Kingdom Curse. It's at the level of corruption and glow that really checks the right boxes for me. I was not a fan of having to go all over the place for these journals, however, but it was certainly better than having to complete every Shores of Gold Tall Tale 5 times over for the Gold Curse. Oh, and sloops got a bed instead of a brig, but you couldn't do anything with them anyway, so GG's. Season 4 is a D for me. I love the expansion to the underworld of the game, but as a primarily solo player, I'm not going down there. Absolutely beautiful to look at, though. Let me get this out of the way. I love Season 5. I feel like it gets a bad rap. Let me break down all the different reasons Season 5 is at least an A tier for me. First, burying treasure. Sea of Thieves came out in March of 2018, but it took until December 2021 for us to get a burying mechanic in the game. I have used this feature so many times to hide valuable loot from opposing crews that I knew were looking for a big score. Yes, I know the burying mechanic was supposed to go hand in hand with the quest board, but we'll get to that. The fact that players could steal treasure maps from one another is exactly what I want to see in a Pirates game. In fact, back when the game first came out, I thought that if you sank another player, you'd get their quests. So seeing this feature was a very nice and welcome surprise. Fireworks are fun, don't lie to yourselves. If they weren't just so damn expensive to buy from the merchant, I'd keep a regular supply of them on board my ship. We got sitting and sleeping, and yes, they're definitely meme-worthy as far as content updates, but sitting in particular bothers me, because you can look at your character sitting, and it's the same pose, the same facial expression every single time. Like, what if you're trying to act like you're in the tavern, sitting down drinking some grog? Nope, sad face. Or what if you want to sit on the bow of your ship and gaze wistfully at the sunset? Nope, sad face. Give me some character in my sitting. The biggest quality of life feature update for me was simple. Take all. God, how did we survive without the take all function? I don't even want to remember it. I mentioned earlier that anything that decreases the time to sail is a huge benefit in my eyes, and this one feature, as small as it sounds, made any gameplay experience in Sea of Thieves 10 times better because of the take all function. It was that impactful. There were 2 limited time events, a Festival of Giving and Grogmanay, and for the very first time, a Community Day, which would then be held once a season every season since, and eventually be expanded into a community weekend. The first Community Day, though, turned into a Community Day and a half after popularity of the boosted day was so great that many players were unable to access the game, only getting the infamous Strawberry Beard error at login. Right before the end of Season 5, we also saw the debut of Sea of Thieves Adventures, a new experience in the game's main adventure mode where time-limited voyages would be made available to players that would further move along the Sea of Thieves storyline instead of having static tall tales. The first, Shrouded Islands, also introduced the character of Belle into the game, having only previously been seen in marketing materials. There are a lot of mixed opinions on Adventures, again with this idea of FOMO still hanging in the air. But personally, I enjoyed them, and felt like my character was interacting more directly with the rest of the Sea of Thieves universe, rather than just following the trail of something. Season 5 is an A for me. I loved most of the new quality of life stuff, but there really wasn't a piece of content that was released that could push it to the foundation of S, which players were told that in advance, but still, would have been nice. Season 6 comes along, and with it brought Sea Forts, one of the most underrated pieces of content I feel, even with all the YouTube videos I see about how you can make money off of them. Because for the first time ever, you could have brand new pirates start their pirate journeys and not have to start with voyages or world events. Yes, shrines and treasures were out there as well, but Sea Forts were specifically made to be soloable pieces of content, where you could go in, finish the fort, and come away with some loot from each of the major starting trading companies. I wish you could do more with Sea Forts. I remember when they first came out, they were teased as a place that players could use and quote-unquote claim as their own. And what that basically amounted to was the use of the extra cooking pans. Imagine if crews could claim Sea Forts as hideouts, or even as slowly producing gold machines, where the longer you held a Sea Fort, the more gold they could potentially produce for you. I still think there are so many opportunities for these zones. At the start of Season 6, we also said farewell to Arena mode in Sea of Thieves. It had already stopped being actively developed back in December of 2020, and according to Rare personnel, had been a boondoggle for them to try and invest their time and effort in both it and the main adventure mode. Now, you could make the argument that there was never an equal amount of attention put into Arena as was Adventure, and I would personally say that's true. I'm going to bring up Fallout 76 again here because it's striking how similar these situations played out. Both Sea of Thieves and Fallout 76 came out in 2018. Both had mediocre at best launches, and one of the ways that each development team thought to recover from this was to stick on a PvP mode. Fallout 76 with Nuclear Winter and Sea of Thieves with Arena. And both, within just a few years, removed those modes altogether. Now, they're both still going strong though, 6 years after their launches, but each game's older community still remembers their PvP modes mostly fondly. Sea of Thieves continued with its adventure storyline and even celebrated 1 million pirate legends in April of 2022 before revealing the new Athena Voyage Legends of the Veil, which replaced the older Athena Voyage as the go-to piece of content for pirate legends looking to level Athena's fortune. Personally, I haven't been a huge fan of any of the Athena's Fortune voyages, but if I had to choose one, I would go with Legend of the Veil, just for the different flavor of how it randomizes which twists to give you, as well as giving you the opportunity to see that tornado in the distance and know there's a chest of legends just sitting there waiting for somebody to come by and steal it. It was in Season 6 as well that we had our first significant delay in seasonal updates. Season 7 was going to be all about adding brand new mechanics into the game, and that had been proving difficult to fine-tune. So what was normally a 3-month duration became 5 months. This is not going to be the only time this happens in this video, fair warning. I would give Season 6 a C. Sea Forts were good, but could have been so much better, and the length of the season really hampered it in the long run. Season 7 brought Captaincy, and I have a lot of mixed feelings about Captaincy. Personally, I have been wanting to name my ship and have it carry the legacy of my pirate since the beginning. I remember in one of the first previews where John McMurtry talked about what kind of pirate you can be, and up until that point, everyone pretty much played the same pirate, just with different cosmetics. Now there was the potential to be different, or at least that's what I thought at the time. In the end, Captaincy did give players the opportunity to showcase pieces of their career in Sea of Thieves in the form of trinkets, but bigger pieces, like some form of pirate infamy, a bounty system even, remained off the table. The biggest quality of life improvement by far, however, has to be the Sovereign's tents on every outpost. For years, players were used to the idea of having to turn in loot one at a time to the individual trading companies, and if you had managed to snag a large stack, it was almost a punishment to have to turn it all in, especially if you were solo. Now with Captaincy and Sovereigns, just park your ship at the tent, harpoon the loot, and sell it all. It was a godsend for players, and even allowed for more potential shenanigans, with various tuck plays now viable at the tents as well. On top of that, having each piece of loot when sold still impact the reputation of the corresponding trading company was a boost. But a lot of Season 7 was spent fine-tuning the Captaincy update, fixing issues with milestone tracking, adjusting progression, and other bug fixes. On top of this, something that was occurring between Seasons 6 and 7 culminated in September 2022 with the completion of the game's first mystery: who killed DeMarco? Personally, I haven't been a fan of the mysteries as presented, mostly due to how much it relies on being off-game versus in-game. But that could be a whole other video by itself, and this one's already long, so we'll just move on. I'll give Season 7 a B. I like the concept of Captaincy, and it's definitely something that has persisted and grown in the years since. Some aspects of it, like Captain's Voyages, haven't made it through, but in most cases, I love being able to hop onto a pirate ship, see their ship name across their crest, and take a peek at the various trinkets to get a sense of their own Sea of Thieves journey. Season 8 holds a special place in my heart, since that was the season in which I first started to create content in Sea of Thieves. But besides that, I'm not going to beat around the bush. It's an S-tier season. Hourglass changed the way players could decide how to play Sea of Thieves. Feel like getting into a fight right away? Jump into Hourglass. Only have a few minutes of spare time? Jump into Hourglass. Missing the thrill of Arena? I know it's not the same, trust me. But you'd at least jump into Hourglass to try it. It was a massive win for Rare. I say at launch because, like any other system in Sea of Thieves, it had its cracks and exploits that players would eventually find. Fighting at the Shores of Gold where someone didn't have a checkpoint, for example, and of course, the rising number of cheaters in-game. And to be clear, there had always been cheaters in-game, but so few in number that they've been barely noticeable by the larger audience. But with the launch of a PvP-centric mode in Adventure, with titles, cosmetics, and gold on the line, as well as a healthy bit of Sea of Thieves ego, it seemed those cheaters came out of the woodwork. And there would be a back and forth between the developers of Rare and the hacks cheaters would use as patches and overrides would be implemented. Nowadays we have easy anti-cheat builds into the game, but even now, there's still an ongoing struggle to deal with cheats and hacks within Sea of Thieves. That much is clear. Hit detection, another area of opportunity in Sea of Thieves, was also a major pain point during the season in particular, as many players found issues with how the game registered their attacks on opponents in Hourglass. To be fair, it had always had its share of ups and downs, but now with Hourglass being introduced to the mass player base, its shortcomings were pretty apparent. Since then, we've had several updates to how the game registers the attacks, and the team continues to work on it today. The grind for the PvP curses is still a constant source of content for many players, especially newer ones, as they continuously enter the game through sources like Xbox Game Pass and the recent PS5 launch. Even if the season had no other major source of content, Hourglass still gave it a huge shot in the arm that endures today. Again, S tier. Season 9. Man, that's going to be a tough one, because there's a lot to love about Season 9. First off, the Chest of Fortune. For the first time since the game's launch back in 2018, we had a new loot item worth more than the Chest of Legends. On top of that, this chest was going to be tied to cosmetic progression over the course of multiple seasons. This would incentivize players to constantly be on the lookout for whatever the chest of fortune would be at, because it was also going to be on the move. Some locations better than others for sure, but for its debut, it could only have been at the Fort of Fortune, and it made for an excellent pairing. Second, world event scaling. This was an amazing quality of life improvement for Sea of Thieves, especially for smaller crews. Before, all world events acted the same, regardless of how many people were on the crew. But now an efficient solo world event could be done in roughly the same amount of time as an efficient galleon world event. Creating an easier access point for players to be able to enjoy content is always going to get high marks from me. Third, harpoons now unload loot automatically. Another quality of life improvement focused on speeding up the gameplay loop. Before, you would harpoon a treasure and then either yourself or another crewmate would have to manually take the treasure off the harpoon and place it on the deck of your ship. Now, it's basically like a machine gun, rapidly capturing all the loot and organizing it around your harpoon like a small little crescent moon. This one was a little more controversial, as a small but vocal portion of the player base felt it was taking away from the experience of the game. For me, again as a primarily solo player, I have nothing but praise for it. Fourth, I told you I liked a lot about this season. No more Red Sea running. In the past, you may have been chasing your opponents on the seas, only for them to basically give you the middle finger and sail their ship directly into the Red Sea, causing their ship to sink, but also preventing you from acquiring the loot that had been on board. But now, if a ship heads into the Red Sea, all the treasure just resurfaces back in safe waters for easy pickup. Pain point solved. So Season 9 sounds great, right? So why the hesitation? Because Season 9 was long. It lasted for 217 days, over 7 months. This was due to a similar reason for the Season 6 extension. The features coming in Season 10, specifically guilds and safer seas, were having difficulty in getting finalized, so Rare was forced to extend Season 9 twice in order to make up for it. In the midst of Season 9, we also had the second Sea of Thieves mystery regarding the mysterious H, as well as the Legends of Monkey Island Tall Tales being released. Once again, I was personally not a fan of the mystery, but I did appreciate how much more organized this one was compared to the first one, with quests being delivered in-game for players to interact with, but still a lot of attention being placed on outside game sources. I was also disappointed in its ending because there wasn't even a cutscene to wrap up the story and just a single Twitter post in the end. The Legend of Monkey Island Tall Tales were something that I respect the work put into, but I personally didn't find myself as attached to as I did to A Pirate's Life. I know that there is a hardcore fan base for Monkey Island that absolutely loved every bit of it, and for them, the effort that Rare put into bringing those characters to life was fantastic. Something that Rare did a little differently this go around though, with Tall Tales, was to release them at a monthly cadence versus all at once like they did with A Pirate's Life. I would be extremely curious to see whether or not they found that was more effective in player retention in the long run. In addition, very similarly to A Pirate's Life, The Legend of Monkey Island had its fair share of bugs and even exploits that affected the main game. Anyone else remember that red herring? As someone who didn't have a vested interest in Monkey Island, I appreciated the content, but it wasn't something I would go back to once I had finished the commendations. We did have several limited time events, including the 5th anniversary celebrations of the game, a Captain's Week, another Legends Week, an admittedly buggy event called Wish You Were Here, and of course, another community weekend. Things were spread out fairly well over the course of several months, but I don't think anything could really stop players from feeling the ick over the lengthy season. For me, if I don't take the delays into account, Season 9 was a solid B season, maybe even an A. But taking into account the 7 months, I gotta drop it down to a C. Season 10, the so-called Super Season. D. I'm gonna be 100% honest here. Rare needed to knock it out of the park with Season 10 if they wanted to get the player base back on board after the lengthy Season 9. And that just didn't happen. Season 10 was split into 3 content delivery periods. The first month was all about guilds, except guilds in the format is delivered and currently in place today is basically just an upgraded captaincy. There's an emissary system and people can have a plaque on their ship with their guild name on it, but even in a guild system, guild members feel isolated from one another, only just seeing their ship's name on static image showing off that they recently set sail for the guild and completed some milestones. There's nothing in the guilds that felt like the full guild of 24 people were together on their journey. It's something that I still feel is the largest area of opportunity for Sea of Thieves right now today. The second month saw the release of the Skull of Siren Song Voyage. Now, I personally thought that this was going to be a fantastic event, evoking a sense of how Arena used to work, with multiple ships looking to capture the skull and return to Briggsy. What I didn't understand was that given the choice between fighting and not fighting, the majority of players would choose not to fight. And what does that mean for the Skull of Siren song? Well, at launch, the mission was available at a near constant basis. Within just a few minutes of a skull turn-in, another skull voyage was on the mast, ready to get underway. And because of that, and because of the cosmetic rewards being based around digging up loot items and turning in the skull, it was just simply more convenient for players to simply hop from one server to another to find a skull voyage that wasn't being actively contested and then complete that, compared to having to fight over the skull. Don't get me wrong, I understand the dilemma, especially if you have a limited amount of time to play the game. I just simply didn't see it coming, and I think neither did Rare. Another issue that didn't get a resolution until the next season was that the skull was just a simple piece of treasure to turn in. It didn't count toward any of the companies, nor did it give any emissary value, not even to guilds. So once you completed your commendations, there really wasn't any reason to keep going after it. This has been rectified somewhat, and nowadays you can earn guild reputation for this loot. In the final month of the season, Rare released Safer Seas. Now, there have been many videos on Safer Seas and the pros and cons of it, including even from me, so I don't really feel the need to talk about it too much. But let me just say, I personally think I was wrong in the level of impact that it would have had on the Sea of Thieves player base as a whole. In the time since its release, I haven't had a hard time finding others on the seas, and it certainly hasn't prevented me from enjoying the game my way. So if you are a Safer Seas player, all the power to you. That being said, I do hope Safer Seas players make their way into High Seas someday to enjoy the rest of the content that they're missing out on. On a more positive side, we did get a few more extra quality of life improvements that stand the test of time. Collector's chest treasure scooping, extra cooking stoves, better fruit crate contents than just bananas. Though I do love me some bananas. Also, don't put the chest of fortune in the Fort of the Damned again. Thanks. But yeah, as far as content updates, this was the first season that was pretty much a near total miss for me. D. Season 11 is another controversial season. The entire concept revolved around Sea of Thieves on demand, where whatever you wanted to do in game, you just had to pop a voyage on the table and you'd go straight there. Want to go to a skeleton fort but earn just merchant loot from it? Or an Ashen Winds event but just gold hoarder loot? Or what about something like a sea fort but earn Athena loot? You could now do all of that. On top of that, trading companies, which the majority of which have been capped at 75 for a long time, were now set at a maximum of 500. Now, the controversy basically depends on whether or not you believe that the game is best played in a natural state, where treasure is earned over the course of a total voyage on one server, or not. Part of the reason that this on-demand system was put in place was that it was a way to speed up the gameplay loop of sail, fight, sell. And I know during this video I have said repeatedly that anything that sped up the gameplay loop I was all for, but even this gave me pause. Now in hindsight, it's become a natural part of the game just like anything else. Since you can't dive with treasure on board your ship, it forces ships on the sea to carry treasure until they sell. So if you do come across someone, there's a likelihood they have something on board. I did appreciate the revamped voyages though, 100%. Every starting trading company got a huge upgrade when it comes to their voyages, and letting players decide whether to go for a small island or a large island is a nice quality of life perk. Eventually, we would see even Athena voyages get a similar once-over, though that didn't happen until the next season. Now, admittedly, I did not like the fact that if we lowered our emissary flag, we would lose our emissary voyages, which meant no more stacking emissary voyages, but I understand why this change was made. I know I'm a stickler on this one, but one thing I did not like about Season 11 is that it made a few older commendations much harder to complete, including humble and generous gifts, as well as a few message in a bottle quests like fruit and wood crates or gunpowder barrels. I'm giving Season 11 an A. You could tell there was a huge improvement in pacing for the game, and the majority of players appreciated the ease of access in getting the content faster. There were also a few hiccups, including a pretty funny bug that prevented skeleton ships from repairing, which meant easy skeleton fleets, while the chest of fortune was at the skeleton fleet. You really can't make this stuff up. Sadly, I was away for most of this season for personal reasons, but I did manage to get at least the season pass done before the end. Finally, we've arrived at Season 12, a launch on PS5, new weapons, new throwables, new ship cannon ammo, and a few more goodies in store. First, let me just say I'm extremely pleased that Sea of Thieves basically had a chance to have a second debut to a brand new audience on the PS5. I've never been one for gatekeeping video games on particular platforms personally, and I think it was a smart move to get a multiplayer live service game in the hands of as many gamers as possible. PS5 players also got the best version of Sea of Thieves to date, not having to wade through over 6 years of content updates just to get to what they have today, and allowed them to enter the game with clear eyes and unjaded minds. And of course, with Safer Seas and even console-only servers, they could learn at their own pace before joining High Seas and the rest of the community should they so choose. It was a win all around. Now I'm still getting used to the 2 new weapons and throwing knives and the double-barreled pistol, I know Rare is also tweaking the combat mechanics of each to make sure that they can stand toe-to-toe with the other weapons players have available to them, but I'm just not sure if they're for me or if it's just hesitation on my part because they're new. Time will tell on this. I will say that I love Scattershot and Bone Callers. Scattershot is fun because many times it comes across as unexpected when it's used, and that can cause other players to panic. In other cases, I've used Scattershot to speed up a few PvE encounters in skeleton ships and ghost ships. Bone Callers are just fun to use, both in PvE or PvP. And yes, I am Team Bone Caller and Hourglass. Sorry, not sorry. Now, the Horn of Fair Winds, on the other hand, I just don't know why we can't get a guaranteed spawn of it somewhere. I think a perfect place for it would be in the Siren Skull chest right next to the skull itself. Yes, we'd have to rethink its mechanics when under the effects of the Siren Slow Curse, but it would certainly increase participation in that particular event again, at least for another period of time. I'm also a big fan of Harpoon Tightropes. The idea that I can just dash across a rope, get to an enemy ship, grab loot, and dash back just screams pirate shenanigans at me. Or when I'm trying to get to a certain point on the island, I can just harpoon there instead of just trying to cannon over and potentially miss my landing or worse, bounce off and end up in the water. The season did start off with two pretty big hiccups in that Open Crew had been disabled during the PS5 launch and Guild Access was disabled. Both were able to come back over the course of a week or so, but that definitely dinged the impression that incoming players had to Sea of Thieves for sure. But the game did end up being the top selling game on PS5 for a period of time, so all is well that ends well, right? And lastly, on Season 12, the war chest combinations were pretty harsh, though they did get scaled down in difficulty in a recent patch, so it's not too big a deal. But I do feel bad for those players that got them done right away. Technically, Season 12 isn't finished yet, but I feel comfortable giving this season a B. Great improvements in the sandbox, but there really wasn't content-specific drop to elevate it to A or beyond. So that's the rankings. What do you think? Leave a like if you enjoyed the trip down memory lane and a comment with your own ranking. Curious to see how many folks match up and how many differ and why. Until next time, this is Jon Bardcore signing off, saying so long and take care.